Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Ponte Politique. It's a Sunday. It's a few, about 17 minutes after 6 o'clock. And we apologize for the unfortunate and the starting late of this Sunday program. Welcomes you into this yet another conversation on Ponte Politique. If you are new into this conversation and this forum, make sure that you follow us on Ponte Politique on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. And because of the challenges of load shedding, we are unable to highlight and flight the other things on other two platforms, which is on Facebook and Twitter. But we are equally available on Twitter at Ponte Politique, and also on Facebook, Ponte Politique, Instagram, Ponte Politique, and TikTok. And for whatever reason, if we are experiencing any challenges of the network, you must be advised that they are as a result of load shedding. And another announcement is that we are in the cold front this week, and just make sure that you keep yourself warm. And you keep yourself, if you are in South Africa, make sure that you keep yourself warm, because there is a serious problem of electricity. It is called load shedding. But as a way of making sure that we proceed with this conversation, I welcome you, and I want to ensure that in this particular conversation, if there are things that you want to talk about, please put them through on your comments on YouTube. Whatever questions that you have for our guest, please put them through, for our guest, so that our guest can be able to put and answer those particular questions. And today we've got a long and a seasoned campaigner in the struggle for African people. He's a Swazi activist. His name is Mandla Hlatshwayo. Babu Mandla Hlatshwayo, sanibonani baba. Can you unmute yourself? Your viewers will not be able to hear you. Unmute. Yes. Yes.
No, siyabonga kakhulu kusamukela, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Kubonga thina Babu Hlatshwayo for welcoming us again into your house. What is nice about our space is that we do live streams and podcasts wherever you are in the world. So
no, thank you very much.
Welcome, and those that are representing, you are representing as well. Siyabonga kakhulu. Viewers at home, Babu Hlatshwayo is a seasoned campaigner and is a well experienced person. He is currently serving as the chairperson of the Letu Sonke Institute for Strategic Thinking and Development. And that particular institute deals with the issues of research, interdisciplinary researchers and practitioners, educators and politicians to engage meaningfully and discuss on the ongoing challenges of Swaziland. One of the most important things that caught my attention into his biography was his resignation into the Constitutional Review Commission in 1991. And I think that would be one important thing that we will be talking about. But for those who know him, they know that he is a seasoned campaigner, and he's loved amongst his peers, and he's very much interested in the liberation of the African people in the country called Swaziland. And welcome. Let us start. And my first question that I wanted to take out of the way, when we're announcing your presence here, Baba Hlatshwayo, I had said that we are going to be talking about politics in Swaziland. And somebody said to me, no, not Swaziland, Eswatini. Can you clarify for us that particular issue first?
In fact, that was a very wise observation. Swaziland, of course, was the name given at independence. Eswatini is a name that was given by the king and is part of the challenge of the Swazi political environment, where the king by himself and not even through parliament came up with the name and used his powers, which hopefully we'll talk about, that derived from the 1973 decree.
Correct.
And basically issued a royal command. A royal command is not provided for in the 2005 constitution, which is the legal regime in Swaziland. It's just a derivative of the 1973 decree, which I think will deal with as a major issue of the current governance environment in Swaziland. It's the supreme powers in Swaziland of the king derives from that law. So we will not do any justice if we don't go to that law. But it is an expression of the absolute powers of the king that gave us Eswatini. Is not a name that came from any political process where the people of Swaziland say. So I'll just put it that way for now. And as we go into the discussion, we'll bring it into context.
No, that's sufficient. So therefore, it might mean that it is not a name that has been consulted with amongst the people of Swaziland, as you would put it across. But even the name of Swaziland at independence, I don't think it was also consulted with. Is that the same understanding?
Basically, Swaziland has always had that name, largely being the same thing as Bechuanaland, if you know what that is.
Yes,
that came with the British. But we must accept Africa is a name that also has similar roots.
Correct.
But has over time been accepted as our name. So is Swaziland. The difference will be that the independent constitution had the name Swaziland, and we continued with that name. And if we wanted to depart from it, a legal process should have taken place.
Okay. The reason why I'm asking it in this way, it is because the critics of the particular regimes of names, the critics, they might raise the same question when we talk about the absolute powers of the monarch, which means those people who support the monarch's decisions. They would then say, but it is the same thing as with the colonial name. They would argue the same thing. So I'm asking it on the basis of that, so that at least we can have an understanding that even names have got a certain contestation and they've got a particular root in themselves.
Certainly. But in the context of Swaziland, I would say it's not a legitimate name of Swaziland. We can then debate the context and whatever else, but in law, it's not a legitimate name. In politics, it's still not legitimate in the sense that there was never any consultation or adoption of it in any form.
Okay. So for the purposes of this conversation, what do you want us to accept as a name for conversation?
For the conversation, I don't mind. We can use Eswatini because that is what is currently obtaining. Because he is the king, he has stamped his foot down to say it's Eswatini. We can protest as I am protesting, but the reality is Eswatini. Okay,
no, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it, and that's fine with me. And now, let's move to the type of work that you do. Give the summation of the type of work that you do, so that at least the viewers are able to understand what is it that Mandla Hlatshwayo and his mass democratic movement are particularly doing. Summate for us that particular point.
Sure. Thank you very much. I would say the broader mass democratic movement in Swaziland is largely focused on forcing reforms in Swaziland in a substantive way that recognizes the rights of citizens. To explain this, we must actually first understand that at independence, many of the laws which were imposed by the British were never actually changed or reformed. There were very harsh instruments of which were really part of the legal environment, which actually constrained the ability of citizens to be able to express themselves and to fully participate in the affairs of state. However, those laws were in a way softened by the fact that the independent constitution did actually give people rights. When in 1973, the king repealed the constitution, the colonial rules, which basically were the tools of trade for the colonialists, became the teeth that basically were biting every Swazi. So what we are really concerned about in Swaziland is that the rights of Swazis, whether you're talking about land or participation in the economy or participating in the politics of the country, or the distribution of natural resources of the country, or the use of whatever other liquid assets, whether it's the rivers, you are actually facing a situation where these, after 1973, became the inheritance of the king. What that did, it distorted the development of Swaziland, in that the focus of the state has never been to actually drive the development of ordinary people. So when you actually look at the infrastructure for human development, whether you're talking about schools or you're talking about colleges, when you look at primary education, you will find that you have 28 to 29,000 young people who are actually attending school at various levels. When you actually talk about kids who are leaving primary education, you will find that about 12,000 of them are just dropouts in the system. Why? Because the state has no serious interest in their development. Without being convoluted, I think what we're basically trying to say is that the Swazi state has become the property of the Swazi royal family.
Okay.
And you will see that in the economics, the king controls or owns close to 60% of the Swazi economy. The Swazi economy is about 100 billion rands in rand terms. Of that, 26% to 27% is owned by a Coca-Cola owned company called Conco, which provides all the concentrates in South Africa for making Coca-Cola or all the related drinks. And they supply the whole of Africa. So that makes it a major company.
Major company, yes.
Yes. And the balance of that, then you are now left with about 74 billion, which makes up the balance of the economy of Swaziland. What we say is that the king controls 60% of that. And that does not go into the development of Swaziland.
Okay.
You will find that it is owned by various companies which are associated with the king, with his family, with his friends and proxies. The difficulty of that is that it constrains the ability of the country to develop, because we are having this concentration of the national wealth in the family and not actually being distributed for the development of everyone in the country. That part of the economy is the single largest challenge that the Swazi struggle is about. Another part associated with that is that you have the South African economy being a major contributor to the 100 billion that I was referring to. 85% of all the Swazi economy derives from South Africa, trade with South Africa. And so when Swazis are saying we need solidarity from South Africans in helping us to deal with the distortion in human development in Swaziland, to stop the whole influx of people from Swaziland coming to South Africa, we're basically meaning that you are also directly contributing in the human rights abuses and the underdevelopment of ordinary people. Why? Because you are also protecting the illegal activity that is obtaining in Swaziland. In South Africa, you talk of state capture.
Let me just, before we move to that to that particular aspect, I want to make sure that even because majority of the people who might be watching this might also be South African citizens. So basically you are saying, when you talk about solidarity with South Africa, it's not only solidarity with South African citizens, but also solidarity with South African government. Is that what you are thinking about?
Maybe let's just open it up this way. The Swazi state, the king, is actually running almost like what you would refer to as a mafia state. Because only in a mafia state can you have a situation where public assets become private assets.
Are controlled by an individual and
controlled by a family. And what we're talking about is not foreign, it's not unknown to the South African government. Correct. It's not unknown to the South African politicians. It's not unknown to the South African civil society environment.
I see.
And when the Swazis are standing up to say, this is unacceptable, you wouldn't yourself in South Africa accept to have a situation whereby you have one family that owns the economy and we are all subjects and not citizens of your own country.
I see.
Amongst the big issues is the economy.
I see.
Of the elements of that economy, if you look at the budget of the state, you will see that the king actually allocates himself his share of the budget. It's not a parliamentary process that is actually saying this is what the king must have. The king sets the budget himself.
And because of the supremeness of himself.
Because he is above the law, and he owns the country. He owns the government. He owns the assets of Swaziland. And in fact, there are occasions where he literally says, even his father was not that gullible as to go that far and say, so on the aspect of the fundamental challenges we're facing is that the economy of Swaziland is not working for the people of Swaziland.
Okay.
And you can even see from the lifestyle of the king, if you look at his jet, is 3 times the size of your president's jet. And he does not have one, he has 2.
Okay.
And
That's bad.
when he lands here, you will think it's the US president landing. That is only possible because the people of Swaziland have no voice.
Okay.
And the king is only able to have this absolute voice over everyone through the use of force.
Okay.
It's not a legitimate process where the people of Swaziland have voluntarily basically given the king that special status
That
to say,
special status.
we want you to be the one who's the guardian and owner of everything. No. That's why in June 2021, we had over 100 people killed.
I remember
for basically
that.
standing up to this and say, this is unacceptable. A country cannot be run this way. We must also have a say.
I see that. I see this where, and I love how you are presenting this point from where you are starting, because the initial question was the type of work that you do, and typical to an educator, a person who's got a mindset of an educator. When you're bringing us to the type of work that we are doing, you first start by saying this is the contestation. And so the contestation is that the economy of the country is amassed and it is placed at one family and it is controlled by one person. Even the law is determined by one person, the king, and everything else. And therefore, the spread of resources of Swaziland, or Eswatini, if one were to say, is limited in that particular regard. If you are joining us today, we are on PUDEMO on YouTube. Please make sure that you put across your comments and your questions for Mandla Hlatshwayo. But for a few minutes, I think that he has just disconnected for one reason or the other. And immediately when he comes back, we are going to continue with the conversation. But please give us your comments and your questions. Lungelo Mthethwa, we could see your comment when you were saying to Mandla Hlatshwayo, we are following leadership. And also Tabisho Kunene, Amandla Comrade Dudula, we see also those comments. We are looking forward to other comments as well. And those that are watching, I see you on YouTube. Please make sure that you subscribe to our channel, YouTube, and our YouTube channel, which is PUDEMO. You would hear that it's French. It is a French for a bridge to politics. The idea of the channel is to make sure that we give a segue into politics, because the majority of people tend to believe and think that politics, one, do not affect them. Two, that they say politics is very complex and it's very difficult. So for the purposes of answering that need, we then developed this particular platform almost 2 years ago. We are 1 year and 11 months now, almost 2 years ago, to try and bring in conversations and voices of people that are not ordinarily in the public domain in politics, and also to give a little bit of a basic understanding of politics at different places. So that was the purpose of this particular platform, and we continue with that particular conversation, and we love what we do. So please just click on the subscribe button and make sure that on the channel, and make sure that you follow us even on Twitter, even on YouTube, and even on TikTok, Facebook. Just make sure that you follow us so that you don't miss anything in relation to this. But this month of May is particularly dedicated to the liberation of Africans, so Africa Liberation Month. And for the purposes of that, that's why we called in Mandla Hlatshwayo to come and present some of the issues that they are contesting in Swaziland, because the Swati people are equally Africans, and therefore the African liberation theme sits directly with the people of Eswatini, because the contours, the roots and pillars of colonialism and imperialism are being handed over, or have been are being utilized in the monarch. So in the monarch of Swaziland, as you have heard from Mandla Hlatshwayo earlier when he was starting, that the majority of things that were still in place during the independence of Swaziland or Eswatini, some of the things were not destroyed, and therefore in 2023, since 1970s, when this particular so-called independence was put across, the things relating to that had not been dismantled, and therefore in the theme of African Liberation Month or Africa Month, we put the Africans in the forefront. So I really need you to understand how we are moving with this particular issue. But some of the things that I want to converse and ask Mandla Hlatshwayo are whether this process, if you are watching and you are part of the movement, Yabo or Babu Mandla, is the process itself that you seek, is it a process that is going to have a parliamentary supremacy or a constitutional supremacy? And what are the lessons that you have learned in both the apartheid government, which had used the apartheid supremacy as its principles of governance, and also what have you learned from the post 1994 South African government, which has utilized the constitutional democracy as its principle. So for those people who are part and parcel of that movement and who feels like it is important that there must be a change, and I agree that there must be a change, but what type of change that you are particularly looking for? So we are still waiting for Mandla Hlatshwayo to come back and join us. I suspect that he might have been affected also by some things. He says he is trying to reconnect. So immediately when he reconnects, we will continue with the conversation. But please bring us with your comments and questions. I see some of those comments that are directed to Mandla Hlatshwayo, but also send some comments to me as well and say something so that I can continue with the conversation. I would love to take your comments and questions. On the 25th of May, it is an African Liberation Day month. They call it, some people call it Africa Month. Unfortunately, it is a day that when we look back at it, it makes it difficult for us to say really that Africa has been liberated, especially that we are having this problem in Swaziland, where other Africans are trying to ensure that they are liberated in some way or the other. I see that Mandla Hlatshwayo is calling me, so let's just hold that thought and let me respond to him. Maybe he's having some trouble in paradise. Let us hear what he is saying. Mandla Hlatshwayo.
Yes.
What seems to be the problem on your side?
No, I just got out and I've been trying. In fact, because I'm using a phone,
okay.
Somebody called and I was stopping it, and that's when I lost you.
Okay, you can just click on the link again, and then you'll come back.
Okay.
Sure. Mandla Hlatshwayo is going to come back again, and we will further immediately when he comes in. I will take your comments. Please put them, bring them, put them across so that it is easy for him when he comes through. We immediately get into your comments as well, so that the conversation is not about me. But in the view of the conversation, it is important that you speak around the issue of what you have learned from these particular societies. I said apartheid and post-apartheid, but also I see that there's a lot of concern around the consultative process, the consultation when it came to this issue of the name, the wording of the territory of Eswatini or Swaziland, whatever you want to choose to call it. In liberal political discourse, there has been this overemphasis on consultation. But sometimes the consultation can lead to a non-implementation of the needs of the society. In South Africa, there was a political process where people had then made submissions of voting for expropriation of land without compensation. And there was then a consultative process that was taken across by the government and parliamentarians and everybody else. And the reverberating message was that we want the land. The Africans in South Africa said, we want the land. And immediately after that consultation process, then there was another process that was initiated by parliamentarians, which then was also, I don't know whether it was augmenting or it was expanding on the what do you call this, on the process of consultation. So I want you, when you're thinking about these things of consultations, you also think about how to curb the criminality and the subversion of the process of consultation and the views of the people to the implementation. You see, you consult, after the consultation, then there needs to be implementation. Now, I want to make sure that you explain to us, how do we ensure that the consultation of the people leads or results in the implementation of the needs of the people. Just give me a little bit of some time. I see that Ubabu Hlatshwayo is really struggling here to get reconnected. Let's just take a breather and see what can be done. We'll be back. We are back, and hopefully that our guest is going to come back to this particular platform. And there was a slight and a technical glitch on his side. I see your comment, Tana Mohaka, and I also see your comment, President Vusi Shongwe. I see your comments, and I want other people as well to give us their comments. Now, if you're able to see and if you're able to answer these particular questions on the timeline, on the comment, engage each other there and see what we can come up with, because we need to expand the conversation. Dana Mohaka is asking, Babu Hlatshwayo, since you are saying the Eswatini state can't be relied on for adequate public services, what can be done to ensure people of Eswatini have access to health, education, and other public needs? And I'm asking, Dana is asking this question, but also Vusi, you can engage us on this particular issue as well, if you are able to, and if you are able to respond to that question. But Shongwe as well is talking to. You are kindly referred to our country as Swaziland, dear host. So I hear that Vusi says he prefers that I refer to the country as Swaziland. The Eswatini name was illegally and unilaterally renamed by the Killer King without any consultation. So let us please stick to Swaziland. Thank you for that, President Vusi. you say we stick to that up until a proper consultative process is conducted in the new Swaziland. So whatever the name might be, it would be the new name. And I see you are saying, no, my brother, on the Swazi question, it's different. The name change was done on the current criminality of total control of everything by the king. So you are basically saying that even the name, the new name, it had ulterior motives. I want to believe that's what you are implying, that it had ulterior motive. And I see what you say. You know, when you are going to create a homogeneous situation, you start by, let's talk about colonialism and imperialism. You start by creating the other. You creating the other. So you say, for us to be able to define that these are people, they must meet certain standards. For us to be able to say, we drive what needs to be done, we create a particular homogenization. So in the case of us Africans, the Europeans called us barbarians, uncivilized people. And then they refer to themselves as civilized people. And from then onwards, everything else was then determined on the basis of civility and those who are uncivilized, that is the barbarians. Now, even in this particular instance, you are then going to have a same situation, Vusi, where those who are accepting the Eswatini would be seen to be on the side of the king, and therefore they might have access, or they might have some element of being amassed or access to the economic and the benefits, if one were to say. And those that are contesting against the Eswatini, like yourself and others, then there would be a problem of what you would refer to as the others, because you want to maintain the Swaziland on the basis that the Swaziland is a what you would refer to a people that are contesting against the king. So there is that thing that tends to happen. I see that Ubabushongwe says he has logged on, so let us try and see what seems to be the slight problem, because we are going to run out of time if we continue with the situation. So let us try and see how to solve this particular problem. Just a minute, guys. We are trying to see what seems to be the problem. The technician guy here with us is going to try and help us and see whether we can solve Babushongo's problem. Yeah, and we're struggling to see. We're struggling to see him in the. We're struggling to see, and we're really struggling to get hold of him in the lobby. We're really struggling. Just give us a minute. Let us. apologies for that, colleagues and friends. And Babushongwe is back with us. Here is he. And Babushongwe, let's proceed. Let's go straight to it. Otherwise, we will not have sufficient time. We know that things of technology, they tend to have their own problems.
Let me summarize it this way, because we've lost time. The colonialists took away land, the economy, education, minerals, and human rights from Swazis. When the king came in, he used the same colonial instruments to take the same rights from Swazis. What the struggle is about in Swaziland is to restore those rights to every Swazi, so that the Swazi state can be an environment for the development of everyone in Swaziland. That basically is, in a summary, the issues that we're actually facing. Where we broke off, I was attempting to summarize that the size of the economy is 100 billion. 26% of that, or 26 billion, is made by one company called Congo.
Okay.
26% will be the government of Swaziland, which is basically the national budget.
Okay.
48% of that is what is being 100% controlled by the king with his proxies, or let me say that's basically the dominant role that he is actually having over everyone in Swaziland.
Okay.
And I was also saying the South African economy is a major player in the kind of difficulties we're facing in Swaziland.
I see.
Why?
I see.
The money and the wealth is being generated from South Africa that is actually flowing to Swaziland.
To Swaziland, yes.
And we believe that the government, the politicians, are just turning a blind eye to something that, if we were having a white man doing this to us, I'm sure you would be fighting with us to try and get rid of this problem.
I see.
That is in a nutshell. That is our issue.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We will try and see what we can do. But here is a comment that is coming to you. If you are then saying that the state of Eswatini cannot be relied upon, what can the public or what can the people of Swaziland do to ensure that they have access to health, education, and other needs? This is a comment from Dana Mohaka.
Okay, thank you very much. In the same way that the South Africans here fought apartheid, and I would like to state that many Swazis, including myself, were in the battlefield of supporting the South African struggle. We believe it was our own struggle. We were having comrades from South Africa in Swaziland. We're going throughout Africa in pursuit of the liberation of South Africa. And the people of South Africa fought for their struggle, fought for their freedom. That's the same thing that is happening in Swaziland. The people of Swaziland are fighting hard. The only thing that we think needs to be escalated is the regional support for the people of Swaziland. What we're seeing is Europeans are the ones who are reacting more to the human rights abuses, the assassination of human rights activists, the bankrupting of the Swazi state by the royal family and those that are close to them. When it comes to us here in Southern Africa, and South Africa in particular, we've seen our comrades in the ANC being associated with investments in Swaziland with the king.
Okay.
And that has made it very difficult for us to appreciate how are we going to get these comrades to stand up for the same rights that they fought for in South Africa, and also want to see them for their own brothers and sisters inside Swaziland. So we think that the Swazis are fighting hard in the streets and they are dying and bleeding for their own liberation. But we don't think that the region is doing enough to also strengthen the voice of the Swazis in Swaziland. But I must also state, comrade, that there are people in South Africa who have died in Swaziland, fighting side by side to the people of Swaziland. With Comrade Mbedzi from Limpopo, he was sentenced to a ridiculous period of over 8 years in jail for his role in the support of the Swazi people in Swaziland.
I see.
And he literally died in prison. They just brought him back home to die because they knew he could not recover from.
He could not recover anymore. Yeah.
So I think on the side of the Swazis, yes, there is room for the Swazis to strengthen their own capacity to fight within Swaziland, to strengthen their capacity to organize and lead their own people. There is room for that, but there is a huge gap when it comes to the kind of solidarity that we saw in the 80s, in the 90s, where people were rolling their sleeves to say, if you can look at Zambia, Zambia's development was stunted by their support of South Africa. They could not really develop purely because they could not see how the future would be without the South African people being liberated. We saw the same thing in Mozambique. The Mozambicans were fighting hard to ensure that South Africa was liberated. The poor people of Swaziland were burying their own sons for the struggle in South Africa. So we are not, in my view, being unfair when we actually demand of our own Black people to actually have feelings and a conscience for the people of Swaziland.
And that is important, because as a people, as an African people, we always live in communitarian or even in collective understanding. But Hlatshwayo, there is an issue here of you spoke about the assassination of individuals, and there is a comment that I've lighted here from Udlamin Utembelihle Kantokozo is raising the similar thing to say that in 2018, Comrade Tulani was assassinated when he was challenging the decree name change. But also at the same time, you mentioned somebody from Limpopo, an African brother from Limpopo. But at the same time, we are aware that there are people who live in exile, who have been exiled because of the processes that are taking place in Swaziland. Your view and the impact of that into your struggle, is it only negative, or also does it also have a positive outcome when you've got the majority, some of your people exiled outside of Swaziland? But also I asked you about the assassinations and the killing and all that, the impact of that in your struggle as a Swati people.
I must just state that the president of PUDEMO is in South Africa in exile. The Secretary General of PUDEMO may not be in exile, but spends a lot of time in South Africa. Why? Because very serious attempts were made on their lives in Swaziland. When you have for instance, the Secretary General's house was sprayed with, I think, over 48 bullets of the military grade being just sprayed into his house. And he was inside with his children. This was a way of silencing PUDEMO. It was a way of silencing the call for change and reforms inside Swaziland. So he had to disengage in terms of political organization, political leadership inside Swaziland in order to come and find protection in South Africa. The same thing, the president of PUDEMO's house was basically bombed with a military grade type explosive. And it was very clear that this is not something you can pick up in the streets. Only the
I
army
see.
will have that type of military word to be used in the manner that it was used. So he also had to flee and is currently in South Africa, unable to provide leadership inside Swaziland. We had a highly respected human rights lawyer who was the chairman of the mass democratic movement in Swaziland, Comrade Thulan Masego. Thulan was killed in January this year, on the 21st of January. An extremely, almost religiously strong man around the issues of peaceful action, standing for human rights, non-violence. You could not persuade him around those principles. The system saw the power that he was commanding in terms of political organization, international representation of the issues of Swaziland, and they chose to silence him. Killed in the presence of his children, watching TV, with a special military weapon that actually where the bullet enters is a very tiny wound, and where it actually leaves the body, it's almost like it's an explosive in your head.
Yeah,
and that's basically what happened to him.
Okay.
So
yeah.
the point there is that the political system inside Swaziland is destabilizing and ensuring that there can be no serious internal leadership that is actually challenging the regime or the government of the king.
And some people, here's a comment Mangoba Babu Hlatshwayo. Mangoba is saying, because I was asking earlier about raising the comment about the issue of what people should do. Mangoba says our answer is people-to-people solidarity. We Africans must not wait for government solidarity, but NGO to NGO, trade union to trade union, church to church, and party solidarity to party solidarity. Is this the same sentiment that you have?
I'm sure you remember some years ago when we had the major political strife in Zimbabwe. I think it was 2007, 2008, after the elections, where Mugabe actually lost the elections to the opposition.
Yes.
Instead of conceding, they went to buy arms in China, and the shipment was brought here to actually deliver arms that will assist the regime of Mugabe to stay in power. It's the people of this region and South Africa that basically said, away with the government. We will not allow this shipment to be offloaded. We will not allow this shipment to be given transit to be carrying this stuff to Zimbabwe. And due to that, that shipment was forced to turn back to China.
Okay.
And without the weapons being offloaded. That is the power of civil society when it's determined to stand up for any agenda. So similarly on the issue of Swaziland, we do believe that the seriousness of what's happening in Swaziland warrants far more support than we've been able to see, going beyond just the blockade of borders, where we're basically beginning to say, let's impose our own sanctions as civil society. We will not buy Swazi sugar in the shops.
Okay.
We will not buy Swazi textile at Mr. Price and other places. We will not buy Swazi wood that is actually being supplied all over South Africa. We will not buy the Swazi concentrates that are making Coca-Cola and et cetera, et cetera. It is when we take actions like that that the governments will want to solve this problem. As we speak, we know that the government of Swaziland is buying their military arsenals in South Africa. No one is asking questions as to, is there any relationship between the people that are being killed in Swaziland and the stuff that's being supplied from here?
And this particular point that you are making, Baba Hlatshwayo, is that there must always be linkages. When you analyze the state of affairs, you must not only analyze it in a small scale, but there must always be linkages. With the remaining 5 minutes that we have, we are going to just pose some few questions around what type of work that you do to ensure that the majority of people outside of the borders of Swaziland, especially in Southern Africa, are able to grasp your message. Who are the people that you work with to ensure that at least there is a messaging of this struggle that you are waging against the supreme monarch of Swaziland?
Thank you very much. I think if there's an area where we do need to roll our sleeves more, is that area. PUDEMO has been working very closely with the ANC, with the South African Communist Party, with COSATU on the question of Swaziland. For the past 20 years, there's been very strong relationship around solidarity, and some of the conferences of the ANC, of the SACP, of COSATU have come up with resolutions in support of the Swazi struggle as a product of that relationship. But there is a need to ensure that we have this kind of conversations in community radios, in spaces that allow ordinary South Africans to understand that there is a war in Swaziland. And that war is being waged by the royal family against their own people over basic rights of the people of Swaziland. And I think more can be done to actually achieve that. There are also church leaders who are actively involved in the engagement of this matter with the people of Swaziland through church relations.
Okay.
But there are strong relations with the trade union movement. There are significant relations within the mass democratic movement and political parties.
And the link, the linkage and the silence that is taking place in Swaziland is the same silence that you see taking place in Sudan. But it's strange that you would have the very same people in the Southern Africa raising a solidarity voice with Palestine, raising a solidarity voice with Ukraine. So what would be your call to somebody who is watching or who will be watching this podcast whenever? What would be your call to them in the 2 minutes that is available? What would be your call to them, even to the person who does not understand the intricacies of the politics of Swaziland?
Thando Lwethu, that is the most embarrassing aspect of us African leaders. African leaders have not risen to the level where they are taking responsibility for Africa. We, of course, can see the conflict that is taking place in the Sudan, and it's now the Western world that is being drawn into it in terms of how to deal with it. We give lip service to this issue of African solutions for African problems. When it comes to now standing up for those matters, we saw the SADC Troika in 2021 in Swaziland, 2022, where the king was responding very violently to the legitimate demands for reforms and actually killing people SADC was lame. They went to Swaziland. They were trying to appease the king. Very weird excuses were being used as to why they were not hardening their hands to force dialogue and political negotiations to solve the problem. To the extent that it's very clear that they are walking away from the problem. In the US, the senators are proposing a motion on persuading the Swazi regime to adopt urgent reforms. And when this actually ends up coming from outside Africa, it then looks like the leaders or Black leaders in civil society in the countries like Swaziland, they are now in bed with Western countries, when in fact that's a reflection of the failure of African leadership. It's the same thing we're seeing in the Sudan. I haven't seen any major move by anyone to say, let's put together an African mission to go and solve and look for ways of solving the problem of the Sudan. Just as we've also have been failed in Swaziland. But we are seeing moves to go to Ukraine. Not that going to Ukraine is wrong. It's really what we must encourage, but it should not be in place of taking responsibility for our own problems and issues in Africa.
On the basis of that, it is therefore in the interest of Africans to club together in this particular point that you are putting across around the issue of Swaziland, the Sudan, and so on, and other parts of the continent. I remember there was something that you spoke about earlier, and I think it is important now that I remember it. You were speaking about the law that you said was the central pillar that has created an environment, or that has been, I want to use a correct word that you used, that has been not taken into consideration by the monarch. There was something that you spoke about, a particular laws or laws that you said they were in.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it is important that you can just teach us a little bit about that. And on your last comment before you leave this studio, tell us your reasons for resigning with in the Constitutional Review Committee in 1991. That will be the closing part.
Sure. The 1973 decree basically is the legal proclamation for the coup that took place in Swaziland. The royal family, when they saw that they were losing power after the 1972 post-independence elections, they decided that the only way they will stay in power will be by actually taking power by force. And that was through this law called the 1973 decree. A decree is not an act of parliament. A decree is a pronouncement by someone. So the king's father, Sobhuza II, is the one that basically made the proclamation, which is called the 1973 decree, where he just made a pronouncement, and that pronouncement was elevated into a lawful position or status by the use of force, whereby the army and all the securities of state came in to ensure that that word will be respected as the law of Swaziland. There has never been an effort to repeal and remove that law. That law bans political parties. It actually elevates the king to be above all laws and above the state. He has executive, legislative, and judicial powers. And when he makes pronouncements, those pronouncements become law. The Constitution of Swaziland is actually a subordinate law. It's below this supreme law of 1973. That basically means you can have anything. You can have your elections, as currently we're having processes towards elections. The parliament that will be elected out of these processes has no power to actually hold the king to account for anything. They have no power to basically withstand a command. A command is a word by the king. Whatever that he states becomes what has to happen. The royal command has the power to overrule any even existing law. So that's why it is a very powerful, illegitimate instrument through which Swaziland is being ruled. And you cannot discuss the politics of Swaziland without discussing the 1973 decree. Then if I go to the issue of the 1991 constitutional review process, I was invited to participate in it through the same thing called Royal Command. But because I was coming from a political party, within our own party, we felt that this thing will serve absolutely no purpose because it has no terms of reference that defined its parameters or what it was seeking to do. It was also dominated by the royal family appointees and members. And it was very clear that there was no intention to address the fundamental issues that affect every Swazi. The fundamental issues are issues of the land, are issues of natural resources, issues of the economy, issues of the politics of the country. These were actually falling outside the terms of reference of that investigation. So for that reason, I refused to participate. If we had more time, I will tell you how Thabo Mbeki and others was requested to come and mediate that we must participate.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we could not agree that there was any role we could play in that institution.
Mm. And thanks for giving us that light. Earlier, when you were disconnected, I had made a submission around the issue of the participation process, whether the type of a society that you need and you're looking for, whether have you learned from apartheid South Africa where there was a parliamentary supremacy, and whether you have learned from South Africa post 1994 where there is a constitutional supremacy, and now what are you looking for out of this entire process? I've seen a hashtag that says multi-party democracy. I've heard something. I see Mbongeni Smelane who is talking about we need a constitution based on shared values, acceptable principles, human rights, and democratic values, which are beautiful concepts. But I wanted to know earlier when you left as to the type of society that you are looking for, therefore, because it is important. I know that we lost so much time, but I think these are some of the important things that we can somehow take over. And I apologize that I'm keeping you for longer than I expected.
That's fine. So long as we're connected, I'm going to be entering into load shedding in about 3 minutes. So
no,
let's hope we will survive.
Make it short.
And try and be brief. Yes, we are actually looking for a multi-party democracy in Swaziland, which is actually defined by public participation. Why? Because people of Swaziland have not been able to participate in their affairs since independence.
Okay.
And the issue of Swazis participating in defining the Swaziland we want is major.
Okay.
We are also keen to have a democracy whereby the constitutional framework is able to allow the people of Swaziland to govern themselves independent of the royal family.
Okay.
The biggest headache at the moment is that the royal family wants to be a party in the politics of the day, and they don't want to also take the damage associated with losing, because if they want to have a political party, it's okay, let them form a political party. Okay. And then if they lose, they must accept that that means the royal family itself will come to an end because it's no longer in power. Okay. But they could easily adopt a position where they are non-partisan, where they actually moved out of politics. But we're also looking for a constitutional environment that brings some measure of reparations, because for 50 years, the resources of Swaziland have actually been stolen by groups that we can see in Swaziland.
Okay.
If you are looking for capitalist external players, they are very small. The bigger players are inside Swaziland.
I see.
So you can't have a constitutional framework that turns a blind eye to the starvation that has been orchestrated inside Swaziland.
And by the people which you know?
By the people which we actually know and we can see.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So
continue.
When it comes to the constitutional framework, we believe that the most important aspect is to actually ensure that you are having a very clear separation of powers, which currently do not exist. You are able to have an independent parliament with powers that are well defined by the people, for the people, and not for a family.
Okay.
You are having an independent judiciary that is made up of the best minds of the Swazi legal environment, not stooges of the system. Currently, we're having generally people who are favored by the regime to play the role of gatekeepers. You can't challenge the king, you can't challenge the state, they will block you.
I see. Okay.
We would like to have an executive authority in Swaziland which reflects the winning agenda of the day by the political party that has been able to present to the people of Swaziland the best alternative for Swaziland. Okay. And not a situation whereby you are having the royal family making that determination. Currently, they say we have a system that is based on the will of individuals. So when these individuals get into parliament, they are given a royal command, as I was explaining what a royal command is. And whoever has the money is the one that will actually pay you what to say and what to do.
That's madness.
So it is for that reason that participation in the current parliament is just a way of basically being employed by the system for their overall objective, because the parliamentary system has no power over the 1973 decree, which raises the king to be supreme in the Swazi legal environment.
I see. This is a good lesson for us, and I hope that we can continue with this particular conversation furthermore. And I appreciate it. I'm sorry that you had a slight disconnection. We know that we can't trust these technological things. But what we are going to do is one day we are going to continue with this particular conversation, and we can expand. And we hope that Upon the Politique, the bridge to politics, and your host, Thandile Tugatlanga, was able to at least put the message across, and we will continue to make sure that we give solidarity into the people of Eswatini. Babu Hlatshwayo, we appreciate your time, and thank you very much for being with us in this particular evening.
Thank you very much.
Yes, to all those who have been watching with us, the people who are supporting the movement in Swaziland and the Eswatini activists, thank you very much for being part of this conversation and for your comments. This episode is going to flight tomorrow at 12 again on YouTube. It's going to be flighted tomorrow. You can tell your friends and comrades, family, and whoever that it is going to flight again tomorrow at 12 on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe and be part of this wonderful family, and make submissions and suggestions about how to improve the conversation and how to make sure that we improve the platform. At this moment, I am in another part of the province in the Eastern Cape, and some of the challenges that we might have experienced earlier in this episode might have been caused by the load shedding schedule, which is different to our ordinary load shedding schedule when we are in Gauteng. So please, guys, make sure that you are continuing to follow Upon the Politique in all the platforms, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like our Twitter page, and follow our Facebook page, our Instagram, and our TikTok. Thank you very much for being part of the conversation. Thank you very much for listening us over the expected time, but you're still here. Your host says, see you again next week on Sunday on another live platform. And next week, we've got another great Africanist who will be part and parcel of this conversation. And in all that I have said, I want to say to you, thank you, and thank you, and thank you. Bye-bye. See you next week.